All right, guys, how we doing? Sam here with you. It's Wednesday, the 5th of, what are we, June? June. Okay, so you guys saw the polling results. XLM to the dollar was the clear winner. It's still getting votes, interestingly, as I just check it here. Now, I'm not going to work through the count all the way to the bottom. I think we can make a case here for this last 5 down to present a potential low down here, this February low. My assumption is you guys are interested in the bull side. I tend to assume that, right? I shouldn't always assume that, but given what we have off here, there's a few interesting things here. Let me take this off here. Now we've looked at this in the not too distant past here, where we bump into this judgment call that you have to make. So coming off the low here, boy, the structure is such a clear 5. It's very hard to label that as anything other, but note we have a very, I'm talking 2-tick overlap of the 1. So you might look at that and think, oh, okay, well, I've got a diagonal, but it actually does not work as a diagonal because this would be a leading diagonal. And a purist will quickly note here that this would be an expanding diagonal here. And 5, well, I'll just show you here, 5 is shorter than 3, so that wouldn't qualify. So because of that, and how slight that, let me see here, 5 is not longer. So it's such a slight, and we're sitting here, we're on Bitfinex with a little leverage here. I'm inclined to allow for it. Again, as I've said, I'm not such a purist that would invalidate this 5 here, at least to me, right? So take it for what it's worth. Now, the ABC is a little funky in that we have a shallow B, if correctly identified here, and that's a bit of a kick in the C here, unusually deep. But we don't. So God, come on, trading view, always 2 clicks, kind of annoying. Okay, so here we go. All right, so golden zone, then we break it, 786 holds it, so it's not. If you were teeing up the ideal 1-2, that isn't exactly what you'd look for. And then we have this problem here. So what do we do with this? Well, so it doesn't look like it's a 1-2-3, really, does it? It looks much more like you'd be 1-2, and perhaps it's 1-2. Now this is long enough, but the symmetry is just wacky. So this is clear, clean. I know we have our little overlap here, but the symmetry here is also good. Then this, despite the extension in the C wave, this is as the 3 relative to that 1-2. It feels like the symmetry just doesn't quite work. Now, we do have a couple of pivots here to consider with regards to resistance. So if this 5 is correctly identified here, this would be the dominant that we would pull from, and it does look like we've just run into the 38 here. So then you might think, oh, could this be an ABC? Well, you can't eliminate that possibility, right? So if we think about, here's 0 down here, just below the algo target. I'm a bull, so I recognize the potential that this could be an ABC, but I don't think that's what we're doing here. So with that acknowledged, that is certainly a possibility here, that this could be the stardom move down here to challenge this low. I'll call it rose-colored glasses here. I don't see it, right? So I think we are much more likely this. Now let's dig into here. Okay, so this is a bit of a cluster here because we've just gone straight up. So how do you approach that? Well, the 1-2 looks pretty solid. So the 1 into the 2. Well, here's our high probability zone, so you can guess why I'm labeling this here. So this is our, I can get the little 3-4 here, and then it's a big rip in the 5. So it's not ideal, obviously, right? So it's a judgment call. Are you going to let this play as a 5? Well, I'm inclined to, right? So now, of course, I hear myself saying, well, I'm allowing for the overlap here. I'm allowing for the odd shape here. I understand, right? So one thought is when you hear yourself, or that's going off in your head, is it too much allowance for abnormalities to make a trade here? Well, that's not an unreasonable stance to take. Now, we can just go, but remember, as I will often tell you, the Elliott is not the priority. So first we want to look at what are the algorithms doing? What have they done last? Okay, well, I've got a clear swing high to swing low, and so far we've tapped the, well, here's a front run. Here we've just, well, I guess you'd call that another front run, is we're not in the golden zone. So this appears to me like we could trade this as a WXY. So I've got an ABC, oh, God, trading view, come on. I've got a WXY here. Then I think I can go ABC into an X wave here, and then yet again an ABC. Now, are we done here? This looks like there could be the potential for one more kick down, although it could also be a 1-2. So you gotta, it's a bit of a hurry up and wait here. So we can look here now. No, well, let me just show you this. So from this swing here, so we get the lower range. Pulling from this side here, we get the upper range. So what do we have, right? Just a big algo fib fight between golden zones. Right, so bouncing sideways from one golden zone to the next, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Who's in charge here? Bulls or bears? Well, this is where. So at this point, either say, "Well, I'm not taking a trade here until I get some resolution here, until we get out of this zone." Another thought is, well, down here at the lower edge of it, that's proven to be support. We're at a technically significant level here. It's been tested twice, so there's a reasonable line of thinking that would suggest, well, if I'm a bull and I want to be a buyer here, I've got a very low risk. So if your stop's under the 65, I've got a low risk, high potential reward trade setting up. I mean, that's not unreasonable thinking. I mean, we've been going sideways since, when do we got there? That's May 17th. June 5th. I mean, this is a pretty good, fairly well-established range that we're stuck in here. So what's going to drive this? Well, we can, with this range established here, let me clear some of this up. Well, this is ABC, so we might do a little projection here and say, okay, length of the A projected from the B. Well, we've hit 100. We might also say, is there an algo play in here? All right, so they've broken the 6-5 here, 786 holds it. So the AB, you can see the little ABC in there is fairly clean. Now this looks like 1, 2, could be 3, 4, one more drive down. So if that's the case, if we're gonna finish down here, the 1272 and the second algo target, not an unreasonable spot. So if we dig in, oh, it gets a little, let's go to the 30-minute. I don't like to go too much below that. But if we were trying to label this, you could see it here. So you could well, let's see. Let's dig in there a little more. Is that 1, 2? Is this 1, 2, 1, 2? And we're getting a little thin here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I think you'd have to do it this way. So this would be 1, 2. Let's get over here. Yeah, you could do it this way. You could call that done there, because we did just tap the golden zone. This is a tap of the 618. So for a bull, it's not unreasonable to think we've gone 1, 2, having completed the C here of the Y while holding the golden zone. Now, there's not, as I recall, the geometry here wasn't ideal. Let's see. All right, so we're a little shy here of making the median line. Let's see if I'm right on there. Get right on that pivot. Okay, so how do you interpret that? Well, failure to make the median line, of course, would be, so per trading principle number 4, failure to make the median line sets up a move equal to or greater than the swing that failed to get there, right? So equal to or greater than, and we're heading off. So it's not unreasonable here to think, okay, I got a 1, I got a 2, I'm going 3, 4, and 5. Now let me, here we're gonna do it this way, and we'll put it in white so we can see it. Okay, so I've got 5 coming down here. So I'm on the 30-minute. So we see a little divergence here in the Elliott oscillator. So here's the selling volumes subsiding here. Now we're not ripping out of here. We've got a little divergence here in the RSI as well. So you've got a few things implying that we could certainly be done here. Just out of curiosity, let's check that too. So we're to and through here without much trouble. So we come 38. A little volatility around the targets here, and then we've got, here's our other targets here. So pulling that off. So could this be 1-2S? Yeah, let's see. So we had this one as well. If that A is done here, and we've gone 786, so it's ideally. So are we going to go this low here? I think you could trade this as a 1-2. So 1. Right, so we go between the 786 and the 61. Pardon me. The golden's on the 786. Not unreasonable. So if we're going to come out of this, so here's your stop, or so here's the range, here's the risk, right here. Okay, so you could be a buyer here, assuming you're a bull. Let's put this here. Knowing, all right, we know we're going to hit some resistance along the way, but let's use that 3. Let's use the pivot here. Now let's construct on the other side. So if that's coming off, and if we're going to take this off, so here's our risk. So you might wait for a little pullback. So if we're going to get a 1-2 here, 1-2. All right, so here's our high probability zone for a 3 relative to this degree, 2618, something like that. Might be working the time here a little bit differently. Okay, so let's put it like that. So can we get this come out of the hole here? 1, 2 up for the 3, A, B, C for the 4, and then we finish the 5. Seems like a reasonable case to be made here. So let's bring this down. All right, so let's be more conservative. So if you're going to give it max risk, so you're looking at 3.2 to 1. Don't want to give it that much. You want to use the pivot here. So if on the assumption that if we break the 786, we're going to go down and challenge this low, right? So that's always what they're after here. It's always, there's stops here, right? So they're the 2, the Bs, these are always a push to get stops. So if you're a buyer here, stop under the pivot. Now you got a little over 5 to 1 if we're going to get that 3. So I don't hate it, right? So so here's the problem with it. There's very little subdivision in the B. Pardon me. In the 2, right? I don't like to go below the. It's going to get really spotty down here. So you're kind of having to just work with what you've got here. So if you're a bull, that risk reward is really, that's not bad, right? I say 5 to 1. I wouldn't lever it up and go heavy here, but there's definitely a little swing trade here. Right, reasonable downside. All right, so that's always the first question. Where if I'm wrong, and if I'm wrong, is that changing the count? What does that do to the count? So as we look at it here, it may be that, well, so of course one possibility is coming off of the B, if that's correctly identified, that we're just doing a 1-2 and there's going to be a bigger 5 coming. Right, certainly, we got to have a stop on this, right? We always got to, first assumption is that I'm wrong, and then where am I absolutely certain that I'm wrong? Well, I'm absolutely certain at the break of this pivot. Here, right, we're just trying to define a better risk reward here. So you could come down here, get stopped out, and then that eventually goes to its target. Well, you got to be prepared to pull the trigger a second time if you like the trade as much. So you could even do this here. You've got a little 1, 2, right? So now you line this up here like that. Maybe something like that. All right, so you've got a potential golden corner. Now the 80%, right, applies to making the median line. We can make that here and then bounce back down. All right, so are we going to do it in this timeline? Well, you don't know, right? We could do the 3 right here. We could just blow right through the median line and get that upper parallel. But here's your target. All right, so the caveat being, as long as this pivot holds, 80% of making the median line. So that's the risk reward. So I think there's a nice little trade there. It's not buy it and hold it and never look at it again. Check back in a couple of years. Although that may not be a bad way to approach it here. That's not how I would do it here. So I'd have reasonable targets here. So 5 to 1. Right, it's a nice little trade. There you go. Okay, well that probably give you enough to chew on there. There's plenty of. It's not a ideal count. We've got multiple areas where you got to make a judgment call. So use your best judgment there, guys. But sure as hell get a stop on it. All right, guys, back to you in a bit.